What if the secret to unshakable strength lies not in power, wealth, or control, but in a truth so profound it transformed lives for centuries? Imagine facing the darkest storms of life, betrayal, loss, or despair, and emerging not just unbroken, but stronger, with a heart full of peace. Jesus, the man who walked among us yet carried divine wisdom, revealed this mystery through his life and teachings. What was the hidden truth he shared that can anchor us through any trial? Could it be the key to resilience you've been searching for? Join us as we unravel this ancient wisdom and let us know in the comments, what does true strength mean to you? Stay with us to discover the answers, and don't forget to like or share. Picture a barren wilderness, the sun scorching the earth, and a man standing alone, hungry, tempted by the whispers of darkness. This was Jesus, facing the ultimate test of endurance. In that desolate place with no food for 40 days, he didn't rely on his own strength. Instead, he turned to the eternal words of God, declaring, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." What does this tell us? True strength isn't found in physical might or worldly solutions. It's forged in trusting God's sovereignty, even when the path ahead seems impossible. Consider the eagle soaring above the storm, its wings lifted by unseen winds. Isaiah 40 verse 31 promises, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles." When life's trials threaten to overwhelm, trusting God becomes our anchor. Why do we so often lean on our own understanding, only to find it faltering? Proverbs 3:5-6 urges us to trust in the Lord with all our heart, to let Him direct our paths. Imagine the peace of surrendering your fears to a God who sees beyond the horizon. Have you ever faced a moment when trust was all you had left? How did it shape you? Jesus' wilderness victory shows us that trust in God transforms weakness into resilience, guiding us through the unknown. Now, envision a garden under the shadow of night, the air heavy with the weight of an impending sacrifice. In Gethsemane, Jesus knelt, his soul in anguish, yet he prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." In that moment of unbearable pressure, prayer was his refuge. Why did Jesus, the Son of God, need to pray? Because prayer is the heartbeat of resilience, a lifeline that connects us to divine strength. Luke 5:16 tells us Jesus often withdrew to lonely places to pray, finding clarity and power in communion with the Father. What could happen if we made prayer as constant as breathing? Think of prayer as a river, carving through the hardest stone over time. It's not just a ritual, it's a conversation that aligns our hearts with God's purpose. Jesus taught his disciples to pray, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name," showing us that prayer isn't about demanding answers, but seeking God's presence. In today's world, where chaos and distraction reign, how often do we pause to connect with the one who holds all things together? Prayer doesn't just change circumstances, it changes us, giving us the strength to face what lies ahead. When was the last time you prayed through a storm? Jesus' example calls us to make prayer our foundation, a source of unshakable resilience. Now, imagine a room filled with dusty, weary travelers, their feet stained from the roads of Galilee. Jesus, the teacher revered by thousands, kneels before his disciples, a towel in hand, washing their feet. This wasn't just an act of humility, it was a radical declaration of strength. In a world obsessed with status and power, Jesus showed that true resilience flows from serving others. Why would the King of Kings choose such a lowly task? Because serving others lifts our eyes from our own struggles, anchoring us in love and purpose. Think of the crowds that followed Jesus, hungry and desperate. When he fed the 5,000 with just a few loaves and fish, he didn't just meet their physical needs. He revealed a deeper truth. Service, as Mark 10 verse 45 declares, is the essence of his mission. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. In serving, we reflect Christ's love, finding strength that renews our spirit. Have you ever noticed how helping someone else lightens your own burdens? Galatians 6:9-10 reminds us to keep doing good, for in due time, we'll reap a harvest of resilience. In today's world, where division and self-interest dominate, what would happen if we chose to serve like Jesus? His life challenges us to find strength not in being served, but in serving others with a heart full of love. Picture a boat tossed by a raging storm, waves crashing, winds howling, and the disciples gripped by fear. In the chaos, Jesus slept, unshaken. When they woke him, he spoke, "Peace, be still," and the storm obeyed. What kind of faith can silence a tempest? Jesus showed that even in the darkest trials, faith is our anchor. His words in Matthew 17:20 echo through time. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, "Move," and it will move. Why do we so often let fear drown out our faith? Consider the woman who suffered for 12 years, her body broken, her hope nearly gone. Yet with one touch of Jesus' cloak, she was healed. Her faith, though small, was enough. In our own lives, when the storms of loss, illness, or uncertainty rage, faith becomes our lifeline. It's not about having perfect confidence, but trusting God's power in our weakness. How often do we let doubt steal our peace? Jesus' life invites us to hold fast to faith, however small, knowing it can move mountains. In a world of endless crises, what would it look like to trust God's promises, like those in Matthew 8:26, that He is with us in the storm? Faith doesn't eliminate trials, it empowers us to walk through them with hope. Imagine a hill called Golgotha, where the air is thick with pain and betrayal. Jesus, nailed to a cross, looks upon those who mock and crucify him. In that moment of unimaginable suffering, he speaks words that echo through eternity. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." How could such forgiveness flow from a heart enduring such agony? Jesus revealed that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's a fortress of spiritual strength. Why do we cling to grudges, letting resentment chain us to the past? Consider Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, yet years later he embraced them with forgiveness, declaring in Genesis 50:20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, but it frees us to heal. Jesus taught in Matthew 6:14 and 15 that forgiving others opens the door to God's forgiveness for us. In a world where anger and division fester, what would happen if we chose to forgive as Jesus did? Picture the weight of bitterness lifting, relationships restored, and hearts finding peace. Have you ever struggled to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? Forgiveness, Jesus shows us, is a radical act of resilience, transforming pain into purpose and anchoring us in God's grace. Now, return to that shadowed Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus faced the weight of the cross. His sweat fell like drops of blood as he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." In that surrender, Jesus revealed the ultimate source of resilience, accepting God's will, even when it leads through suffering. Why do we fight against the plans God has for us, clinging to our own desires? True strength lies in trusting that God's purpose is greater than our pain. Think of Abraham, called to sacrifice his son Isaac, a promise fulfilled after years of waiting. Yet, in obedience, he climbed the mountain, trusting God's plan. Genesis 22 shows us that God provided a ram in place of Isaac, proving his faithfulness. Jesus echoed this surrender in the Lord's Prayer, teaching us to pray, "Your kingdom come, your will be done." Matthew 6:10. Romans 8:28 assures us that all things work together for good for those who love God. In our modern lives, filled with uncertainty and plans that unravel, what would it look like to surrender control to God? Accepting His will doesn't mean passivity. It means aligning our hearts with His eternal purpose, finding peace that surpasses understanding. When have you struggled to let go and trust God's path? Jesus' surrender invites us to find resilience in embracing God's perfect will. Step back for a moment and imagine a life unshaken by the storms of this world. A life where trust, prayer, service, faith, forgiveness, and surrender weave together to form an unbreakable foundation. Jesus didn't just teach these principles, He lived them, showing us a path to resilience that transcends time. From the wilderness to the cross, His life was a testament to the power of aligning with God's purpose. But here's the question that lingers. What would your life look like if you embraced these truths? Could they transform your struggles into strength, your pain into purpose? In a world that often feels like a raging sea, these 6 principles are like a lighthouse, guiding us to solid ground. Trusting God anchors us in chaos. Prayer connects us to His strength. Serving others lifts our hearts. Faith moves mountains. Forgiveness sets us free. And surrendering to God's will brings peace that defies understanding. Together, they form a blueprint for a resilient life, one that reflects the love and power of Christ. So, what's holding you back from living this way? Why not take one step today? Perhaps a moment of prayer, an act of service, or a choice to forgive. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Which of these principles resonates with you most? Share your story in the comments below, and let's inspire each other to live with unshakable strength. If this journey through Jesus' teachings has touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that illuminate the path to a life of faith. Let's walk this road together, trusting that God's wisdom will guide us through every storm. Until next time, keep seeking, keep trusting, and keep shining His light.